Hello, everyone. This is Rob Golfi with REMAX, the Golfi Team. Welcome to the Golfi Real Estate Show with host Stephanie Vivier.
Well, hello there, Rob Golfi. How are you? I feel like it's been forever.
It's because I had Phil do the show, I think, last week, and I hope he was good. He's the guy that's going to be the predecessor, I guess. Is that the right terminology? The one that's going to take over down the road. He's well spoken, and I hope things turned out good. But I want to talk about what's happening in real estate, and I don't know if it's got something to do with the snow, but I went based on the first 18 days of this month. And in January, in St. Catharines alone, January was 37 transactions, okay? Now, and then in February, there's 53. So in St. Catharines, it actually improved quite a bit in February.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's been pretty good. So now in January, the benchmark price was $585,000, and in February it went up to $611,000. So it's going to be bouncing around. So it's actually that's St. Catharines. Now in Niagara Falls, in January there was 39 transactions, but it dropped to 33 in February. So something's going on. Let's see. So in the benchmark price in January was $579,500, and in February it was $600. So it did go up. So the prices are going up a little bit, but the unit sales are down. Now in Welland, we've had in January 29 sales, and in February there was 27. So it's pretty close. But let's take a look. January benchmark price $570,000. In February, $600,000 so far. So that's in the first 18 days of January and first 18 days of February. So things are moving along. So now you could see as the prices go up, I always say, put your house on the market February, March. This is the time to get started on going. I know there's a lot of snow, and I know a lot of people have beautiful gardens and they want to wait till the spring. But sometimes all those buyers have bought already, and it doesn't matter anymore. So that's when everybody puts their house up for sale. There's more competition. There's not that much competition right now. People are looking. People want a house, and the market's starting to move.
I think it might be, Rob, I remember in the pandemic, of course, at the beginning, you were all at home, and then it really sparked a lot of people wanting to make a move. Many people wanted to get a bigger house, right? That they were working from home for the first time and needed more space for offices and things like that. And putting pools in was a big thing, or finding a home with a pool. Maybe the snow is that sort of effect. I've noticed that in our house, we're just having conversations about what we want to do, right? We're staying home more, we're together more. So, people are talking, and as you spend more time in your house, the more you think, maybe it is time to make a change.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of people are looking at it because people right now are putting their house up for sale to move in the spring so that they can have,
right.
So if you put your house up for sale now, we're third week of February, and then you get a close, let's say, you're on the market for 30 days. So you're, middle of March, let's say it takes less than 30 days to sell if it's priced right, and then people moving within 60 days from the sale day. So you got April, May. So right now, if you're looking for a house to or you want to move and you want to be into your next house for May, now's the time to get it on the market and get going, and so that you can start the spring in your new house at your new location or wherever you're going. Timing is and everything. So no, some people wait till April, May, and they're moving in the middle of the summer, and it just depends on what you like and what you want in your timing of the year to move. Some people have kids. So closing dates, a lot of closing dates are at the end of June. So they move into their new neighborhood, and then the kids start back up in September at a new school, and then they get to know the neighborhood. It's just kind of an adjustment for kids. I know I've heard where it says it's good to move during the school year for kids because all the kids are there. They get to make some friends fast. You could end up moving into a neighborhood, and you don't know there's a kid down the street that's the same age as your kid, and they could have played all summer if they knew each other, because they would have been in the same class. They would have known of each other. So there's pros and cons of moving during the summer or during the school year. Usually the curriculum is the same in all schools, whether you're public or Catholic school boards, and so they just continue on to whatever school they're going to.
If you're looking to do that, Rob, you've got young kids, you want to do that sort of June closing date. Can you still look now? Would you still want to list your home now? Is that appropriate, or should you wait?
You know what? I think it could be a little early. It just depends. Like if you put it on the market, let's say March 1st would be good. So you got, let's say it sells sometime in March. You got April, May, June. So that's 90 days. That's pushing it. But that's, I wouldn't try to go any more than that. So if you're looking to move at the end of June, I'd probably wait till March to put your house up for sale. And just indicate that, they're looking for a June closing. And it depends. Sometimes people, they'll drive their kids the last 2 weeks of school. Like if it doesn't get it, they'll drive them there, pick them up, just so that they can, let them finish their school with the current friends that they have at the school. But if you're looking for a June closing, I'd probably wait till March to put your house up for sale for sure.
Okay. And hopefully in March, maybe April, some of these snow piles will be melted. I know in my neighborhood, there's snow piles as tall as I am. So certainly a lot you can't see. So what do we do about that? There's snow covering everything right now. But as you said, it's a good time to get out there, make the move. There's opportunities to have conversations and really think about what you're doing. So how do you inspect or know what you're getting for those snow covered areas?
So this is a good way to hide stuff if you want to hide stuff with the snow. If you got bad shingles, but believe me, once it's melted, you should be honest about it. But like a lot of things are hidden during the snow, like the shingles, driveway and walkways. Like, is there a lot of cracks on the concrete? If you have concrete, is there a lot of lifting? Foundation issues. It's hard to tell. Like, everything's frozen, right? You don't know if you have leaks and stuff like that. The landscaping gardening, it's hard to see that unless you got previous pictures. Gutters and drainage is tough. Decks and patios, fencing and outbuildings are tough to see. Exterior siding, if there's damage on that. And also septic systems and well access, and pavement and parking. Like I'll tell you, I walked on a property one time, and I tripped. It was just, maybe a little bit of snow, and there was a big, like the concrete walkway. There was a lift, and I tripped and I broke my finger. And so you don't see those things when there's snow, right? And so the thing is, it's good to, like, if you're investigating and you're looking at buying a house and there's snow, there's ways of seeing everything. One, check Google Maps. Sometimes that you can see, usually most Google Map photos are in the spring, summer, and fall. So that's one indication. See if there's an old listing that your realtor can find you that has pictures of the backyard, the front yard, that it hasn't changed that much. Get something signed saying, hey, when were the shingles done? Were they done 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago? And if they don't have anything, and find out how long they lived there, find out if they've lived there for, let's say, 10 years and they haven't done the shingles, check the previous listing and see if they've if there was any shingles replaced from the previous listing, the previous owners. It's always good to investigate aggressively when you're looking at homes, especially extreme cold. I would take my jacket off and see what the thermostat's at. And when you're walking through the house, take your jacket off and see how it is. Now, most people, if it's a vacant house, it's usually a little cooler than normal, just because nobody's living there. Why have the heat going crazy? But if somebody is living there, you take your jacket off, you get an indication, how it is, and feel every wall on the floor. See if it's cold. Put your hand on the floor right by the wall and see if there's cold air coming in. You could, if the floor is very cold against the wall, then it's got some insulation factors. Now, if you're looking at a 100-year-old house plus, you're going to have that. I mean, those houses that were built in the late 1800s or early 1900s, they're not going to have any insulation. They're probably double bricked homes, century homes, and you have to expect that. I've owned a few century homes in my past, and I know what to expect, and especially with foundations, stone foundations. Chances are they don't even have weeping tiles if you got stone foundation. But usually, normally they don't have leaks in those basements in most cases. A lot of times the drainage system from the outside, and also the when they with the ground, they've made sure that water flows away from the property. Again, like request photos and things, just go online, see if there's a past home inspection report, and then look for interior signs of problems. Hire a qualified inspector, and make sure you got a good realtor that knows this stuff, because they can find things that most people can't. Because I've been through thousands of homes. I can pinpoint a problem in a house right away. Just walking through it, seeing if they've repaired stuff or done any things. You just get a sense of what's happening, and the basement tells you everything, and it's a good way. Like, you got to be very careful. It is one of the most expensive investments that people make. But the wintertime selling, if you got problems to hide, well, let's hope you don't get in trouble after the closing date, indicating that you knew about the problems, because they will come after you for compensation for fixing anything like that.
Yeah, I think there's some positives and minuses that you just pointed out there, Rob, because, say we go look at a home in June, right? It's much more temperate out. You're not going to notice the draft coming in from the walls or the windows and things like that. So there are certainly advantages to buying a home in this really cold time too.
Oh, absolutely. And especially with pools, a lot of times we have a clause on our offers that we put that if, like, the pool's closed, right? Like, you can't, you don't know if the pool's working. You want to know how old the pool liner is. And if you can dig up the receipt of the pool liner, that's good. But also, sometimes there's a condition in there that says that, hey, if there's any claims against the pool, if there's any problems, they have till a certain date in the spring to claim that. So let's say you got a closing date of, let's say March 1st. Well, the pool's not going to be open until probably May. So you put a date in there and say, listen, but you have to have the pool open by a professional. And if there's any problems, they can claim that. Like, let's say the pump is not working, or the filter's not working, or something's not working on the pool. The seller would have to compensate the buyer and say, to have it replaced or fixed. And there's a lot of that going on, but it gets complicated when you have houses with pools that you buy in the middle of winter, because you don't know, you don't see it. Like, unless you know how old the pool liner is, you don't get to see anything. I remember when I was selling my house, and I took photographs. I had my photographer take photographs of the whole property in the summertime. Now, I didn't know when I was going to put it up for sale, but I ended up putting it up for sale the following year in early spring. So I was able to have beautiful pictures of the backyard. It had a pool, the landscaping showed beautifully, all that kind of stuff. So if you have a house with a pool, just take a lot of pictures of your backyard with no people in it and just put them aside. Hey, you never know. One day you're going to need them. It could be 5 years from now. It could be whenever. But at least you have them. And because if you end up selling your house during the winter, at least you've got them. And if not, then our photographers will go in and photograph the whole house and the pool and everything, and it'll look beautifully in photos.
It's fun, too, to take pictures like that, Rob, just to have on hand. You do renovations over the years, and then you look back and go, oh, yeah, our house used to look like that.
Yeah, no kidding. I know, eh? So...
You're listening to the Golfi Real Estate Show. Rob Golfi is our guest today, and we will continue chatting with him. We'll talk about Ontario's housing crisis, how it got so bad. If you want to connect with the #1 REMAX team in Canada, the Golfi Team, give them a call, 905-641-0308. Back with Rob after this here on News Talk 610 CKTB. Welcome back to the Golfi Real Estate Show. I'm Steph Vivier, and Rob Golfi is with us today. Rob, it is February, and we're in the middle of an Ontario election, and a lot of the candidates, you hear them talking about the housing crisis, right? And you hear this party's promising that, and the other party is promising this, and you've got an opportunity for us here to kind of look back and go, like, how did we get here? How did our housing crisis get to be where it is?
Yeah, with the interest rates that were so low in 2022, that like just the market just went insane, and now they're struggling right now, and we're kind of going through the same thing as the 90s. Now, what they're saying is the issue in Ontario, we've gotten so unaffordable that having slight decreases in price doesn't address the problem. And Mike Moffat, economist and senior director of the think tank, a Smart Prosperity Institute, we have such a large hole to fill that we're looking at a decade or more before we return to any kind of reasonable standard affordability. So I think he's just taken that a little bit from the 90s, because it did take almost a decade for the housing market to catch up. And I think it'll be less than a decade, like less than 10 years, but just because we're in a faster market and there's different things that are happening in this market versus the market of the 90s. And also what the article said that the housing impact on the housing market, the last 2 years, the average price of a home in Ontario was $964,500 in June 2022, the last provincial election, then dropped to $850,000 by the end of 2024, according to the Canadian Real Estate Association. So it is expensive. I think housing has bottomed out. Like, it's not going to drop anymore. That's it. It's just expensive, and it's going to stay that way for a bit. Until things change. Now, they need to build houses. There is a shortage of houses, and developers are not going to build unless they have them sold. And what are they saying is that they're about 5,800 short of building homes. It says this year the province will fall 5,800 homes short of its 92,000 goal. Current economic factors and aftershocks of the pandemic have led to a slowdown in construction starts across Canada, but Ontario seems to have a harder time getting homes built compared to other provinces. It says Ontario registered 74,326 housing starts, almost 5,000 fewer than the 2017 according to CMHC. Now, I hate that they include condominiums as housing starts. I mean, you could put one condo building up, you got 300, 400 units. But a lot of people don't want that. Like, you know what I mean? It's mostly investors. It's usually, it just depends. It's usually a lot of starting people's that are buying them. Like, a lot of investors buy them, and then people rent them. And it's retirees that are buying them because they don't want the headaches of the taking care of their house, but they're very expensive. You want to buy a 2-bedroom, if you're looking for 1,000 square foot condominium, apartment style condominium, they're so expensive, and it just becomes, it's tough. So I hate. They should do separate. Housing starts should be separate than condos. Like, hey, how many townhouses, single, detached, and semis were built in a time frame versus condominiums? So, but what they're showing here, it says average home price in Canada versus Ontario. So in Canada, in Ontario, the average home price is $850,000 right now. In Canada, it's $700,000, and it's crazy. But the cost to live, like they were saying, like, this is in Toronto, covering home ownership expenses, mortgage costs, property tax, maintenance requires more than 75% of the median household income, which is still far exceeding the 30% threshold that defines housing affordability according to the RBC. Now, in Vancouver, it says here ownership expenses are the highest in Canada, requiring at 96.7% medium income. Can you believe that?
Wow.
Unbelievable.
$4 left.
Yeah, exactly. But it has come, and like, even though interest rates are dropping, their houses aren't selling as at that much and that fast. It's not. People are staying where they're put, renewing their mortgages at the new interest rates that are doing now. Cost to move is expensive. Cost to buy a house, it's expensive, and even though the interest rates are down, the big mistake they made to get the economy going was they shouldn't have dropped the interest rates as far as they did, and that caused the housing to go up. People's incomes went up because they couldn't afford the housing, but right now it's gonna flatline for a bit. Even though, you know how I said earlier that the housing prices are up from January to February. Yes, but it floats up and down. Like, it could be 20,000 up, 20,000 down. It just hovers a line, and I think that it's going to do that probably most of the first half of the year. I think things will pick up more later spring or summer. It's hard to gauge. We're totally in a different dynamics. Usually, you can go back and predict, how things are. But after the pandemic, things just totally changed. But I do feel that we bottomed out. If anybody's looking at buying, I think they should buy, within like now or within a year, so that when the next wave of housing prices start climbing again, at least they build some equity. Whoever's buying a house, and they'll be pleased. And I remember the '90s. I mean, you bought a house in let's say June of 1990. The average in 1999, that house was worth the same price. And I remember because I bought a house for $120,000, and I sold it 5 years later. I sold it for $120,000. And I thank God I didn't have to do anything to it. The only thing I did to the house in the 5 years was paint it, because everything was pretty well done. But I did like when you buy something for 120 and sell for 120, you did lose a little bit of money because the cost to sell was there. But yeah, like that was like,
well,
5 years.
There, though, I mean, at the same time, you have to live somewhere, right?
Exactly.
So even if, right, like you would have been renting or whatever, and then that money's gone. So even if it is equal, I mean, that is 5 years. Nobody wants that to happen. But you got to remember, you got to live somewhere. So
exactly. But I remember that was probably one of the very few houses in my lifetime that I purchased and sold, and literally, like, I didn't make any money on. And usually you do, but that was the '90s. That's how it was. And because housing prices just skyrocketed in 1988, 1989, and partially in the beginning of 1990, and then the light switch went off, just like it did in 2022, and we survived it. Everybody, made it through. But if you had to sell, that's where the loss happened. If you had to sell, and the same thing now. There's certain people that have to sell. They bought very high, and they overpaid even in a high market. And I've seen people lose as high as $400,000 that they bought in February of 2022, and now they have to sell, and they're losing like a lot of money. Some people, bought, like, the house is worth $1 million, and they bought for 1.4, and that's a big nut to bite on, like to crack. And some people can't afford to leave, and some people, like, they're stuck. Like, they have to move, but they can't afford to move. What do? They just they have to bite the bullet and move on, and that's the tough part. It's just timing. It was a factor. When markets are fast and crazy, sometimes it's good just to stay where you are, and hopefully things change. I think people, the last time that happened was 1990, and look how many years later it is that it happened. It almost happened in 2000. I think 2016 was the market moving fast, but not as bad as it did in 2021 and 20 in the beginning of 2022. So you know, you just got to be but when you buy a house, you buy to live there at least a minimum of 5 years, long term. It's not a short term thing. You know, that's for the speculators. They can take the chance on that. But if you're looking to move in and enjoy and live there for a bit, then yeah, absolutely. Unless it's job relocation or you have some bad neighbors and you just can't stand them and you got to move. I get it. People have to do that.
Or bad neighbors in your bed, right? Divorce is a lot of
exactly. Bad neighbors in your bed. Exactly. There's a lot of that happening, especially in January. It seems like it's after Christmas that people do that. So
yeah, they've done studies on that. There's a lot of basically, you know, keep it together for the holidays and then we'll split in January. There's actually like science that shows that that's when it happens.
Exactly. You know what? It's funny though. We do get a lot of calls, and we're dealing with a lot of people right now with the separations of people separating right now.
Okay, you were talking about some of those investors, and everyone wants to make some money pretty quick, but you do have to be very careful. And Rob, I love when you highlight the different scams and schemes and things that are happening. And hopefully, you know, the more we highlight these things, the more we can keep our listeners safe. And there's a pretty big Ponzi scheme where a lot of people lost some money.
Yes. So you got to be careful. I'll tell you, I was scammed for someone to bring in as a partnership when I was in my 20s, early 20s. And these guys, they become so good at selling. You believe, like you get drawn into their web of how they're selling you, and it seems like everything makes sense. And this is what happened to this one guy. I think he was in Burlington. And so anyway, this Grunzal promised high returns, 15% in just weeks. Now, that's unheard of. So that's a red flag right there. And this was a Ponzi scheme. And what happens is they you can get interest rates at that level. So if let's say you got a mortgage broker, and what they do is they will get a mortgage, a second mortgage or a private mortgage. They range from 10 to 13%. Okay, those are second mortgages right now, or even less than that. Now that, you know, so what happens is everybody, you know, you lend $100,000. If you're going to get 10% on your money, that's great. But the risk you take is hopefully the guy pays for it, and hopefully the house is worth what you put the mortgage on. Now, what this guy was doing was he was taking money from the first investors, and then the new investors would come in. He would pay the first investors interest. It just got so big to a point where that it caught up to him, and people were starting to ask for their money, and he couldn't pay it back. Now, I'll tell you something. There's a lot of good investors in there. The one thing this guy should have done is check to see what accounting firm he's with. Now, if it's a legitimate accounting firm, like you know, the big names in Niagara or Hamilton or Toronto, like they're a large accounting firm, find out if they're with them. Like, you know what I mean? Because there's a high probability if somebody's doing Ponzi schemes, they're not up to date on their income tax on their corporations. And you know what I mean?
Right.
You know, those are one things. One, it's hard to gauge. Like, you know, whatever information you ask for, it could be a lie. But I would call the accounting firm that they're with. And that's a good indicator. Do your research. Never invest based on trust alone. Excuse me. Monitor your investments. Don't let fear of missing out cloud judgment. So, like, what I do is if I see a good opportunity on an investment property, I actually go to my accountant, and he's got investors, and then we form a corporation. Those guys are on the corp. They're in there. This is not something you just write a check to a fund and you don't know where your money's going, but you actually are the owner of an apartment building or whatever commercial building that you are investing in. So that's an indication right there that, you know what I mean? Like when you go to the lawyer's office, you have to sign to close that deal. You know what I mean? But you got to be very careful on anything that sounds too good to be true. I've been scammed myself, but I've never been scammed again. You only get scammed once, and I got scammed by bringing a partner in, and he was funneling money out of there for his own lifestyle, and it was difficult to go through. But I had the OPP involved, and this guy did go to jail because it wasn't just me he was scamming. He was scamming millions in different other businesses too. So he did go to jail. And but anyway, but be very careful. It's too good to be true. It is.
All right. And definitely think twice. Yeah, we can all get clouded by those numbers. The number one real estate team, the REMAX team in Canada, the Golfi team here for you at 905-641-0308. You are listening to the Golfi Real Estate Show. We'll take a quick break, and Rob will be back with us. If you're thinking about a rural property, you're not going to want to miss our next part of our conversation here on News Talk 610 CKTV. Welcome back to the Golfi Real Estate Show. I'm Steph Vivier, and Rob Golfi is with us today. If you want to find out more about them, you can go to robgolfi.com. Rob, you always bring us such great advice. We've talked about scamming. We've talked about, what to do if you're looking at a property in the winter. And now you're going to help us navigate a rural property. So rural properties are different than if we're buying in the city. How?
Absolutely. A lot of times, especially people coming from Toronto, coming this way towards Hamilton, Niagara, they see a nice property. It's got, maybe 1 or 2 acres, beautiful. And they bring their agent from Toronto, and they think every house has sewers, and it doesn't. And it's amazing how much realtors have no clue about rural properties. They have no clue. They think it has sewers, they have water. So when they make their offers on these houses in the rural areas, they don't put inspection of the septic system, the cistern or the well, the water, like how the water is, or anything. So, I mean, you could have contaminated water, or maybe the cistern is broken and it's leaking. You don't it's insane how a realtor from that doesn't know about a rural property and bringing their client through and not even putting conditions for their client to have these inspected. Now, I've been on the selling end of these properties, and a lot of times these agents, you're thinking they know their stuff. That's experience. You think they would know their stuff. They come in with just financing, a condition or home inspection only, but not indicating that they're doing inspection of the septic or the cistern or the well. And then after, when the people move in, they run out of water. And they're calling me as the listing agent, even though I didn't represent them. I say, well, listen, you don't have running water. I go, you need to call the water truck and have them fill up your cistern. They go, what? We didn't know that. And it happens more than you think. It is crazy. So, like, if you're looking at buying a rural property, make sure they know about rural properties. Here's a thing too. If you're looking at a rural property and you go through the second time, the health department, they give out these little things to collect water in, little plastic containers. Don't do it during the inspection. Do it when you're looking at it the second time. Go to the tap, fill it up with water. A lot of times agents will throw bleach in the cistern to kill it if there is any bacteria in there a day or two before. And but you want to find out if this water is good, because maybe that cistern needs to be power washed or whatever. So there's a lot of little tricks you need to know about when you're dealing with a cistern, and same thing with a septic. You don't want it emptied before you do a inspection. You want it emptied before you take possession, because then mentally you know exactly when the last time it was empty, the septic system. And usually they take sometimes between 3 to 5 years before you need to have it pumped out. It just depends how many people live in the house. But yeah, you definitely... There are a lot of problems that a lot of realtors don't know, and you have to be very careful on that. And right now, there is a lady in, I think she's in Vineland, and I didn't represent anybody on this, not the seller or the buyer. But the agent that represented this client of theirs was representing both the buyer and the seller, and there's a lawsuit going on, and they're calling me for information on how to deal with this and how to deal with that. The person that bought the house, and there was a lot of mistakes made there, and there was a lot of hidden stuff. So just make sure if you have a realtor, they know about rural properties. If they say they do, you could find out. If they don't answer that question fast, they don't. So make sure they understand it and know it, because you could end up buying a property that needs a new septic system, and that can cost you $40,000 for a new septic bed. And that's underground. So you buy a house and then you got to put a new septic system in. $40,000 underground. Nobody's going to come to you and to your house and your family and friends and say, "Hey, beautiful septic system." That your house is worth exactly what you paid for, even with the $40,000 that you just put in to make sure that septic system works, and that means that your toilets and water, everything flows through good. So be very, very careful. Well water, get it checked. Find out if there's any contamination in the well. Check zoning, check to see what the zoning is around that property, especially rural properties. Like, hey, are they going to build a subdivision here, or is this going to be farmland forever? So those are major key factors. And check to see if they have UV, like a good proper filtration system in the basement that, for the water system that they have. It's very, very important. Find out if the septic bed is in the front of the house or the back of the house. If it's at the back of the house, you really can't put a pool there. If it's in the front of the house, and usually any houses that were built probably, I'd say late 70s, they started putting the septic bed in front of the house, because that's when people started putting pools in the 80s and 90s. So it's not a problem there. But usually any house that you're looking at that was built in the 50s and 60s, and if they haven't changed their septic bed, it's going to need a new septic bed. I tell that to everybody. I go, guys, you can take a look at it and check it out. But those septic beds were made out of clay tile versus the new systems that they put in now, and they're probably all filled and clogged. So they got to be very careful on their septic bed, especially if it's an older house. And figure out what the cost is. And a lot of times they don't even have gas connection. It's propane, and usually the propane tank's hidden behind bushes and stuff. So if you're not familiar about rural properties, and if your realtor is not familiar, you're in for a lot of surprises. And so you got to be very careful when you're buying rural properties.
Yeah, and there's something so, charming, right? Like if someone's coming from the city, we get a lot of people from the GTA that want to come down here, and maybe they have that idea, right? Like, oh, we sold our house in, Toronto with our 1 square foot backyard. We can actually get all of this property. They might not understand all that you've set out, like the word cistern. What is that? What's a weeping bed, right? What are these things? How do they all work? It's a lot, and people might just assume that it's just going to work the same as their house worked before.
Absolutely. Now, if they're educated, then they have an understanding. Now they'll accept it. But the saddest thing is they're surprised by it, because nobody taught them. Say, listen, we have to fill up our water, our cistern, our water holding tank. Nobody said that how to maintain a septic bed. Nobody's told us that that our pressure tank is not big enough. Maybe there's a pressure tank to make sure that the water can flow through the house, because there is a cistern or a well, or they have both sometimes. Be very, very careful that, and sometimes there's some rural areas, like if you go on Highway number 8 in Grimsby, Beamsville, like King Street and Main Street, there's some properties there that are on septic systems still. It just depends, but you got to be very careful and read the listing, see if it says, hey, if it's sewers or septic. And if the agent made a mistake, you should see that. That's a big problem. Sometimes agents, out of town agents, they come in and they fill out the listing, and they put down it has sewers, and it doesn't. It has a septic system. They're on the hook for that system, and they can get in trouble for that. So because they didn't read, they didn't fill out the information correct, and that realtor can get sued for that putting out the wrong information. If, for instance, if I put a house up for sale, and let's say I put on the listing the taxes are $5,000, but I didn't read it right, or I didn't research it, and the taxes are $7,000. When the people move in, I could end up paying the difference for the next 5 years. Like,
oh wow,
I can get, like, it's, you know what I mean? So you got to be, realtors have to be careful in filling out information, and that's why we have to fill information that's correct. For instance, if, like, I can't say there's all new wiring because I don't know what's behind the walls unless I know the house was built like in the last 5 years. But I don't know, like, if it's a century home and you look in the basement, you see all new wiring, but guaranteed there's some old wiring behind the walls. If I put down all new wiring, and they open up a wall and they see some knob and tube wiring that's, from the early 1900s, they can come back to me and say, hey, listen, you on your listing, you said it's all new wiring. And so I have to verify. So if I can't see it, I will not put it in on the remarks for people to read. I'll just say, hey, most wiring is updated, but they have to verify the rest. And so you have to be very careful how you're filling out a listing, and you have to know what you're doing. And again, like, these agents from out of town that don't know the areas, you got to be very careful and ask a lot of questions, because I could show a property and I'll tell my client, I go, even though it says sewers here, I don't believe it is. Let's find out. Okay. Like, you know what I mean? So, you know what I mean? Like, because you kind of know what areas have sewers and don't. And if an agent fills out a listing and he's not familiar with the area, he may put the wrong information in the listing. So you got to really know the area. So be careful hiring an agent from Toronto to come to buy a house in Hamilton, Niagara, rural areas, or even Burlington. Just make sure you find somebody that knows about rural properties and knows, like, what to look for in a rural property. And you know how you can find a septic, if the house is on septic system, the sewer line in the basement is halfway in the middle of the basement, like going out. It usually in houses that have sewers, it goes down underneath the basement floor. But septic, you'll see it goes out the side wall. So that's how you know if you got a septic system in the basement. So you got to look in every room of the basement to make sure you can see all that. Yeah, there's a lot of clues. You got to be careful hiring the right person.
Yeah, that's a ton of stuff. Speaking of asking questions, the Competition Bureau has some questions about the use of artificial intelligence and rents. There's been accusations that landlords are actually using AI to actually set their rents. And that's apparently not allowed.
No, but I don't know how they can do this, because, like, they're using AI to gather information. And I don't know if this is just the Competition Bureau they probably got nothing going on their plate and they got to find something. Like, if they can find out if there is problems going on, that's fine. But if you put a house up for rent, the market will dictate whether it will support that rent amount for that unit. Unless there's companies that own thousands of houses in a particular town, maybe they can dictate that and whatever. But I don't think it is. It says here, AI software tracks rental rates in the market and suggests price increases based on competitor pricing. Well, I mean, everybody's competitive pricing. Everybody's going to use AI to find information. And a U.S. lawsuit alleges that landlords using Real Pages, YieldStar platform shared sensitive pricing data to manipulate rent prices. Critics argue the practice could lead to unfair rent hikes and limit competitions. I don't know. I like, it's like housing, right? If you price it too high, nobody's going to buy it, or you have to do a price reduction. We got one that we're leasing out in Niagara Falls, and the rent on it should be about 2,900 to 3,000. So the owner, owns a fair amount of these, and he says, I want to put it for 4,000. I says, there's no sense. You're not going to get it. Like, it's just, nobody's going to pay the 4,000. So anyway, he agreed to drop it $200 a week until it gets to the right point, just in case somebody does want to pay a higher amount for rent. But but again, like, you cannot, it's hard to, for Competition Bureau to track that. Like, I mean, it's like me saying, okay, we're going to put all the houses up for sale and they're all going to be the same price. Like, how do you, I mean, it's easier if you own thousands of houses as a company, but it's tough. I think it's tough because
it's really just using AI to do what you guys do anyway, right? You're going to do that research and see what the market is. You're just, I guess, doing it more quickly. It's not like you wouldn't, if you're not using AI, that you're going to not use the same rents as other comparable properties.
Exactly. It just, we would use the same thing. So I don't know if they can prove that, if they're Competition Bureau like doing that. People use AI now to find information fast and determine what to rent in the area. So it's hard to tell. It's hard to gauge.
Yeah, interesting one. Well, I know you'll keep us updated on it right here on the Golfi Real Estate Show. Another great show if you want to find out more about Rob and the #1 REMAX team in Canada, the Golfi Team. Give them a call, 905-641-0308, robgolfi.com. Rob, always a pleasure. Thank you for your time.
Perfect.
And thanks for listening here on News Talk 610 CKTV.